The bitter January wind howled through the streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, rattling the bare branches of oak trees that lined the pristine roads leading to Westbridge Academy. Inside the marble-floored halls of one of the state's most prestigious private schools, the cold outside seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of central heating and the even warmer glow of privilege that radiated from students whose family names adorned hospital wings and university libraries across New England. Sophia Hawthorne stood at the center of the main hallway like a queen surveying her kingdom, her designer boots clicking against the polished floor with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her place in the world. Her honey blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her cashmere sweater, a shade of cream so pure it seemed to announce that she never worried about stains or spills or any of the mundane concerns that plagued ordinary people. Around her, a carefully curated circle of friends laughed at her every word, their expensive handbags forming a barrier between Sophia's inner circle and the rest of the student body that flowed around them like water around stones in a stream. "Did everyone receive their winter ball committee assignments?" Sophia asked, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone accustomed to being heard. She scrolled through her phone with manicured nails painted in a subtle rose gold that matched her jewelry perfectly. "Because I need to make absolutely sure that the decorations coordinate with my dress. I had it custom made in Paris, and the color is called Midnight Sapphire. It's a shade that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world." Her best friend Madison gasped appropriately. "Sophia, that's incredible. How much did it cost?" Sophia waved her hand dismissively, the gesture itself an answer. "Daddy didn't even blink when I showed him the price. He said a future Yale legacy deserves the best." She smiled, but there was something sharp behind it, something that suggested her confidence required constant feeding, constant validation, that she remained at the top of whatever invisible hierarchy she had constructed in her mind. The morning bell hadn't rung yet, and students continued to filter through the entrance, bringing with them swirls of cold air and the muted sounds of car doors closing in the parking lot. The hallway smelled of expensive perfume and the faint scent of coffee from the cafe that the school had installed 2 years ago, a concession to the students whose parents had complained that teenagers needed better beverage options than the cafeteria's standard offerings. Then, Sophia's expression changed. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on something near the entrance, and her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Speaking of things that don't belong," she said loudly enough for nearby students to hear, "look who's gracing us with her presence." Clara Mendoza pushed through the heavy front doors, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that suggested she didn't have time for the elaborate styling routines that many Westbridge girls employed. Her jacket was clean but clearly several years old, and her jeans, while neat, bore the subtle signs of multiple washings and careful repairs. She kept her eyes down as she walked, a survival strategy she had developed over her 3 years as a scholarship student at Westbridge. Clara's mother worked in the school cafeteria, a fact that Sophia had discovered within Clara's first week at the academy and had weaponized ever since. Maria Mendoza arrived at 4:30 every morning to begin food preparation, and she stayed until 7 at night cleaning up after various school events. Clara had earned her scholarship through exceptional academic performance and a heartbreaking essay about wanting to honor her father's memory by being the first in her family to attend college. The scholarship covered tuition, but it couldn't buy the invisible currency that mattered most at Westbridge, the casual wealth that allowed other students to treat $500 textbooks as disposable and spring break trips to Europe as routine. "Clara," Sophia called out, her voice sticky with false sweetness. "Come here for a second." Clara's steps faltered. Every instinct told her to keep walking, to pretend she hadn't heard, but Sophia's voice had that quality of command that made ignoring it feel like an act of defiance that would only make things worse later. She changed direction, walking toward Sophia's group with the resigned expression of someone approaching an inevitable unpleasantness. "Yes?" Clara asked quietly, stopping at what she hoped was a respectful distance. Sofia wrinkled her nose in an exaggerated gesture, waving her hand in front of her face. Do you smell that, Madison? That greasy smell? It's like French fries and dish soap had a baby. The girls around Sofia giggled, the sound like breaking glass. Clara felt her face grow hot, her hands instinctively gripping the straps of her backpack tighter. She had showered that morning, just like every morning, using the discount body wash from the drugstore, because it was what her mother could afford. The smell Sofia referenced didn't exist, except in the cruel imagination of someone looking for a reason to wound. My mom works hard, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper but steady. There's nothing wrong with honest work. Oh, absolutely, Sofia agreed with mock enthusiasm. Honest work is so important. It's just that, well, some of us are destined for different things, you know. Like I'll be running a foundation someday, helping people like your mom, and you'll be, well, probably doing what your mom does. It's the circle of life. She smiled broadly, as if she had just said something profound and generous, rather than something designed to cut. Clara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. 3 years at Westbridge had taught her that responding only gave Sofia more ammunition, more opportunities to demonstrate her wit at Clara's expense. The key was to endure, to let the moment pass, to remember that in 6 more months she would graduate with honors, earn scholarships to colleges far away from here, and never have to see Sophia Hawthorne again. Anyway, Sofia continued, examining her nails with studied casualness, I wanted to remind you that the winter ball is next Friday. I know you probably weren't planning to come, but just in case you were thinking about it, I feel like I should mention that the dress code is pretty strict. Designer formal wear only. The committee wants to maintain certain standards, you understand. We wouldn't want anyone showing up in something that looks like it came from a garage sale. Madison laughed a little too loudly at this, and Sofia shot her a pleased look. Around them, other students had slowed down, pretending to check their phones or adjust their bags, while actually listening to the interaction with the morbid fascination of witnesses to a car accident. I wasn't planning to go, Clara said, which was mostly true. She had looked at the ticket price, $75, and immediately dismissed the possibility. That money could buy groceries for 2 weeks or cover the copay for her mother's doctor's appointment. The idea of spending it on a single night of dancing in a room full of people who despised her seemed absurd. Good, Sofia said brightly. That's very wise. I mean, the prom queen announcement is going to be the highlight of the night, and it would be so awkward for you to have to watch that. Everyone already knows I'm going to win. My dress alone cost more than your mom probably makes in 3 months. She paused, tilting her head as if a thought had just occurred to her. Actually, I'm curious. How much does a cafeteria worker make? Is it minimum wage or slightly above? Clara felt something inside her chest tighten, a familiar sensation that accompanied these encounters. It wasn't sadness exactly, or even anger. It was more like a profound weariness, a bone-deep exhaustion at having to constantly defend her right to exist in this space, to justify her presence among people who seemed to believe that wealth was a measure of human worth. I have to get to class, Clara said, her voice flat. Of course you do, Sofia replied, waving her hand in dismissal. Run along. Oh, and Clara, if you happen to see your mum during lunch service today, tell her the Caesar salad was a little wilted yesterday. We're paying a lot to go here, so the quality should really be better. Clara turned and walked away, her face burning, her vision slightly blurred by tears. She refused to let fall until she reached the safety of the bathroom. Behind her, she could hear Sofia's group erupting in laughter, the sound following her down the hallway like a pack of hunting dogs celebrating a successful chase. She pushed through the bathroom door and locked herself in a stall, pressing her back against the cold metal wall and taking deep breaths until the tightness in her chest eased. This was routine now. 3 years of this. 3 years of Sofia's carefully crafted cruelties. 3 years of being reminded that her scholarship was charity, that her presence was tolerated but not welcomed, that she would always be the girl who smelled like grease, no matter how many times she showered or how clean her clothes were. But Clara had something that Sofia didn't understand, something that 3 years of bullying hadn't managed to break. determination forged in hardship, creativity born from necessity, and the quiet pride that came from watching her mother's hands, scarred and worn from years of kitchen work, never stop moving, never stop trying, never give up. And in her backpack, hidden in a folder beneath her calculus textbook, Clara carried sketches for a dress, designs she had been working on for months, modifications and improvements to a plan that was slowly, carefully taking shape in the tiny apartment she shared with her mother. Sophia Hawthorne thought the winter ball would be her coronation, her moment of ultimate triumph. She had no idea that she had just made her biggest mistake, underestimating the girl who smelled like grease, the girl whose mother had taught her that the most beautiful things in the world weren't bought in Paris boutiques, but created with determination, imagination, and hands that refused to accept that poverty meant powerlessness. The first bell rang, echoing through the empty bathroom, and Clara wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and walked out to face another day in Sophia's kingdom. But something had shifted. For the first time, instead of just enduring, Clara began to plan. The February snow fell softly over Greenwich, transforming the town into a postcard of New England privilege. The lawns of million-dollar estates disappeared under pristine white blankets, and the naked branches of maple trees wore coats of ice that glittered under streetlights like diamonds. But in the small apartment above the Vietnamese restaurant on the east side of town, where the sounds of traffic and cooking and life pressed close through thin walls, Clara Mendoza barely noticed the winter beauty outside her window. She sat at the cramped kitchen table, surrounded by fabric scraps that spilled across the worn formica surface like a chaotic rainbow. Pieces of silk in deep burgundy, remnants of satin in silver and pearl, fragments of lace that her mother had rescued from the donation bin at the church thrift store where they volunteered on Sundays. The overhead light, a naked bulb that buzzed faintly, cast harsh shadows across the materials. But Clara's eyes had adjusted to seeing possibility where others might see only discarded waste. Her mother, Maria, emerged from the bedroom wearing her heavy winter coat, preparing for the 4:30 morning shift that would begin in less than an hour. Despite the early darkness outside, despite the exhaustion that lined her face after another long day, Maria paused beside the table and placed a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. "Mija, it's past midnight," Maria said softly, her accent wrapping around the English words with the warmth of their native Spanish. "You have school in 6 hours." "I know, Mama," Clara replied, without looking up from the delicate seam she was stitching by hand. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, the needle catching the light as it dove in and out of the fabric. "But I need to finish attaching this layer tonight. The ball is in 8 days, and I still have so much to do." Maria pulled out the other chair and sat down, her movements slow, with the particular weariness that comes from spending 12 hours on your feet in a hot kitchen. She reached across the table and gently took the fabric from Clara's hands, forcing her daughter to look up and meet her eyes. "Clara, are you sure about this?" Maria asked, and there was something in her voice beyond concern, something that sounded like fear. "That girl, Sofia, she is cruel. I see how she looks at you when she comes through the lunch line, like you are beneath her notice. If you go to this dance, if you draw attention to yourself, she will only be worse. Maybe it is better to stay invisible, to finish the year quietly, and then leave for college where no one knows us." Clara felt something fierce and hot rise in her chest, something that had been building for 3 years of invisible existence, 3 years of swallowing insults and pretending that words didn't hurt, 3 years of watching Sofia parade through the hallways like royalty, while Clara pressed herself against lockers to avoid being noticed. "No, Mama," Clara said firmly, taking the fabric back and smoothing it across the table. "I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of letting Sofia make me feel like I don't belong, like my presence is something to apologize for. Papa always said that honest work was noble work, that we should be proud of who we are and what we can do. Well, I can do this." She gestured to the dress taking shape across the table. "I can create something beautiful from nothing. I can walk into that ballroom and show everyone that you don't need Paris boutiques and unlimited credit cards to be worthy of respect." Maria's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across to cup Clara's face with both hands. Hands that bore the scars of knife cuts and burns from years in professional kitchens, hands that had worked tirelessly to give Clara opportunities that Maria herself had never had. "You have your father's fire," Maria whispered. "He would be so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." She paused, then smiled with a sudden mischievous quality that Clara rarely saw in her exhausted mother. "And I have been thinking about this dress of yours. I have an idea, something that might help protect all your hard work. Tomorrow, on my break, I will show you." Before Clara could ask what she meant, Maria stood, pulled her coat tighter, and headed for the door. "Get some sleep, Mija. Dreams are important, but so is rest." Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the narrow stairwell, leaving Clara alone with her fabrics and her determination. The next day at school passed in a blur of classes and careful avoidance. Clara had perfected the art of making herself small, of timing her movements through the hallways to minimize encounters with Sofia's group, of eating lunch quickly in the library rather than the cafeteria where her mother worked and where Sofia held court at the best table by the windows. But as the final bell rang and students flooded toward the exits, Clara made her way to the kitchen instead. The cafeteria was nearly empty now, just a few teachers lingering over coffee and planning meetings. Clara pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen area, where her mother was finishing the daily cleanup. The industrial dishwasher hummed loudly, and the air was thick with the smell of cleaning solution and the lingering scents of the day's meals. "Mama!" Clara called out. Maria emerged from the walk-in refrigerator, carrying a large cardboard box. Her face was flushed from the cold interior, but her eyes sparkled with excitement that made her look 10 years younger. "Perfect timing. Come, help me with this." They carried the box to the prep table, and Maria opened it to reveal layers of fabric unlike anything Clara had seen in their collection before. Sheets of lightweight material in colors that seemed to shift and change in the fluorescent light. Some pieces shimmering silver, others a deep midnight blue. All of them clearly too fine, too expensive to have come from a thrift store donation bin. "Mama, where did you get these?" Clara breathed, running her fingers over the silky material with reverence. Maria's smile turned slightly guilty. "You remember Mrs. Pemberton, the librarian who retired last year? Her daughter owns a bridal boutique in Stamford. They were throwing away sample fabrics, pieces too small for full dresses, but too nice to just discard. When I told her what you were making, what you were trying to do, she gave me these." Maria lifted a piece of shimmering silver fabric that caught the light like moonlight on water. She said every girl deserves to feel beautiful, regardless of what her bank account says. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different from the tears she cried in bathroom stalls after encounters with Sofia. These were tears of gratitude, of hope, of the overwhelming recognition that kindness existed even in a world that often felt cruel. "But that's not the idea I wanted to show you," Maria continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was thinking about what might happen at this dance. Sofia will not be happy to see you there, looking beautiful. She will try to ruin it somehow. I know girls like her, so I thought, what if we prepare for that? What if we make your dress like those magician's tricks with layers and surprises?" Maria pulled out a napkin and began sketching with a pen she pulled from her apron pocket. "Look, we make the dress with 2 complete layers. The outer layer uses the fabrics you have been collecting, the burgundy and the lace. But underneath, hidden, we create a second dress using these silver fabrics. We connect them with special seams here and here." She pointed to spots at the waist and shoulders. "If something happens to the top dress, if Sofia spills something or tears it, you can remove the ruined layer and reveal the beautiful dress underneath. It will look like you planned it, like you're even more clever than she is." Clara stared at the sketch, her mind racing through the implications. It was brilliant. It was more than brilliant. It was the kind of creative problem-solving that came from years of making do with limited resources, of finding solutions that people with money never had to consider. It transformed the dress from a simple statement of defiance into something strategic, something that turned Sofia's inevitable cruelty into an opportunity. "Mama, that's genius," Clara whispered, "but there isn't much time. Can we really make 2 complete dresses in 8 days? Maria set down the pen and looked at her daughter with an expression of fierce determination. "Mija, we are Mendozas. Your father used to say that we came from people who survived revolutions and immigrations, who crossed deserts and rebuilt lives from nothing. Making a dress, this is nothing compared to what our family has overcome. We can do this. We will do this." And so they did. For the next 8 days, the small apartment above the Vietnamese restaurant became a workshop of quiet rebellion. Maria adjusted her schedule, asking for split shifts that would give her afternoon hours to work alongside Clara. They measured and cut and sewed with the focused intensity of soldiers preparing for battle. The outer dress took shape first, a deep burgundy creation with delicate lace sleeves that Clara had painstakingly stitched from 3 different thrift store finds. It was beautiful in an understated way, elegant but not flashy, the kind of dress that would fit perfectly at the winter ball without drawing excessive attention. But the inner dress, the hidden surprise, was something else entirely. Using Mrs. Pemberton's bridal fabrics, they created a gown that seemed to capture light itself, silver material that shimmered with every movement, with strategic panels of sheer fabric that added drama without being inappropriate. It was the kind of dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine, on a red carpet, in a world far removed from cafeteria work and scholarship students. The connection between the 2 layers was Maria's masterpiece. She had remembered a technique from her own mother, Clara's grandmother, who had worked as a seamstress in Mexico City before immigrating to the United States. Special seams that looked decorative but were actually designed to be released quickly. Panels that overlapped in ways that would allow the outer layer to be removed cleanly without damaging the dress underneath. It was engineering disguised as fashion, problem-solving masquerading as beauty. On the Thursday night before the ball, they finished. Clara stood in the center of their tiny living room, wearing the completed creation, while Maria circled around her, checking seams and adjusting hem lengths. The outer burgundy dress fit perfectly, modest and lovely. Then Maria showed Clara how to release the hidden seams, and Clara pulled away the outer layer in one smooth motion, revealing the silver gown beneath. The transformation took less than 30 seconds. "Perfect," Maria breathed. "You look like a princess, Mija. But more importantly, you look like yourself. You look proud." Clara turned to the mirror they had propped against the wall and barely recognized her reflection. The girl, looking back at her, didn't have her eyes downcast, didn't have her shoulders hunched in that protective posture of someone trying to avoid notice. This girl stood tall, stood strong, stood ready. "Tomorrow, we show them," Clara said softly. "We show Sofia and everyone else that creativity and dignity don't have price tags. That being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage of all." Maria pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, and for a long moment they stood together in their small apartment, surrounded by scraps of fabric and loose threads, 2 women preparing to walk into a room full of privilege and declare that they belonged there just as much as anyone else. Outside, the February snow continued to fall, but inside something warmer and more powerful was building. The quiet fire of people who had been told they were less, who had been treated as invisible, who had decided that enough was enough and that tomorrow everything would change. Friday arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made the wealthy residents of Greenwich grateful for their heated garages and remote car starters. The sky was a sheet of grey steel, threatening more snow, but holding back as if waiting for the perfect dramatic moment. By 6 in the evening, when the winter ball was scheduled to begin, darkness had settled over the town completely, broken only by the warm glow of street lights and the extravagant displays of Christmas lights that many families left up through February. because taking them down felt like admitting that winter would last much longer. In the small apartment above the Vietnamese restaurant, Clara stood before the mirror while her mother made final adjustments to the burgundy outer layer of the dress. Maria's hands moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent decades working with precision under pressure, tucking a loose thread here, smoothing a seam there, checking and rechecking the hidden connections that would allow the transformation they had planned. "Remember," Maria said softly, meeting Clara's eyes in the mirror's reflection, "if nothing happens, if Sofia leaves you alone, then you simply enjoy the dance in this beautiful dress you created. But if she tries something, if she attempts to humiliate you, you know what to do. You turn her cruelty into your triumph." Clara nodded, her throat tight with a mixture of nervousness and excitement that made it difficult to speak. She had never been to a school dance before, had always convinced herself that she didn't want to go, that such things were frivolous wastes of time better spent studying or working. But the truth she had hidden even from herself, was that she had wanted to go desperately. She had wanted to feel like a normal teenager for just one night, to dance and laugh and exist in the same spaces as her classmates without being made to feel like an intruder at someone else's party. "You look so beautiful, Mija," Maria whispered, and Clara saw tears gathering in her mother's eyes. "Your father would have been so proud to see you like this, so strong, so brave, so determined not to let anyone make you small." Clara turned from the mirror and hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of kitchen spices and the lavender soap Maria always used. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mama. This dress, this night, it's as much yours as it is mine." They held each other for a long moment, and then Maria pulled back, wiping her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Enough tears. You will ruin your makeup. Now go. Show them what the daughter of Maria Mendoza can do." The drive to Westbridge Academy took only 15 minutes, but to Clara it felt like crossing into another country entirely. The school had been transformed for the evening, the parking lot filled with expensive cars that probably cost more than Clara and her mother would earn in 5 years combined. Students emerged from vehicles in groups, the girls in gowns that sparkled under the parking lot lights, the boys in tuxedos that had been tailored to fit perfectly. Clara recognized several classmates and saw their surprised expressions as they noticed her arrival, noticed her dress, noticed that the invisible scholarship girl had dared to show up to the most important social event of the year. The main entrance had been decorated with white lights and silver balloons that bobbed in the cold wind. Clara pulled her mother's old coat tighter around herself, hiding the burgundy dress beneath its worn fabric, and walked through the doors into a scene that took her breath away. The school gymnasium had been completely transformed. Gone were the basketball hoops and the industrial lighting and the scuffed wooden floors that usually defined the space. In their place was something that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, with flowing white curtains draped from the ceiling, thousands of tiny lights creating a canopy of artificial stars, and round tables covered in silver cloth surrounding a central dance floor that gleamed under strategically placed spotlights. A live band occupied one corner, playing soft jazz that mixed with the sound of conversation and laughter that filled the enormous room. And there, holding court at a table directly in front of the stage where the prom queen would eventually be crowned, sat Sofia Hawthorne, surrounded by her usual entourage. But tonight, Sofia looked different, elevated somehow, transformed by the midnight blue gown she had mentioned so often in the preceding weeks. It was indeed spectacular, probably imported from Paris, as she had claimed, with intricate beading that caught the light and created patterns of stars across the fabric. Her hair had been professionally styled in an elaborate updo that must have taken hours to create, and her makeup was flawless, applied with the skill that came from expensive salon visits. She looked every inch the queen she expected to be crowned. Clara stood near the entrance, still wearing her coat, suddenly unsure of herself. The dress she and her mother had created seemed so simple compared to Sofia's obvious extravagance, so humble compared to the designer gowns that filled the room. Maybe this had been a mistake. Maybe coming here had been an act of foolish pride that would only result in more humiliation. But then she remembered her mother's scarred hands sewing late into the night, remembered her father's voice from years ago telling her that true worth came from character and effort rather than money and privilege, remembered 3 years of making herself small and invisible and silent. And Clara reached up and removed her coat. The effect was immediate. Conversations near the entrance faltered and stopped as students turned to look at the girl who had just arrived. The burgundy dress, with its delicate lace sleeves and elegant simplicity, stood out precisely because it was different from everything else in the room. Where other girls wore obvious luxury, Clara wore something that spoke of creativity and care, of hours of patient work and artistic vision. The dress moved with her as she walked, the fabric catching the light in subtle ways that suggested quality, despite its thrift store origins. Clara moved through the crowd with her head held high, very aware that people were watching her, whispering about her, wondering where the scholarship girl had found such a dress. She didn't go directly to find a table, but instead walked slowly around the perimeter of the dance floor, allowing herself to be seen, allowing her dress to make its statement. And then Sofia noticed her. Clara watched the exact moment when Sofia's gaze found her across the room, watched as Sofia's confident smile faltered for just a second before transforming into something harder, something sharp-edged and dangerous. Sofia leaned over to whisper something to Madison, and both girls stared at Clara with expressions that mixed surprise with barely concealed anger. The evening progressed with a tension that hummed beneath the surface of music and dancing. Clara sat at a table near the back with several other scholarship students who had scraped together enough money for tickets, kids like her who existed on the margins of Westbridge society. They complimented her dress with genuine warmth, asked how she had made it, expressed admiration for her courage in coming despite Sofia's well-known hostility. But Clara's attention kept drifting back to Sofia's table, where she could see animated conversations taking place, could see Sofia's face growing more flushed as the evening wore on, could practically feel the rage building as people continued to notice Clara's dress, continued to whisper about how beautiful and unique it was. Then came the moment Clara had been both dreading and anticipating. Sofia stood up from her table, her midnight blue gown swishing dramatically as she moved, and began walking directly toward Clara with a cup in her hand, a cup filled with deep purple grape juice that looked almost black under the gymnasium lights. Madison and 2 other girls from Sofia's inner circle followed behind her like attendants in a royal procession. The music seemed to fade into the background as Sofia approached. Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears, but she remained seated, remained calm, her hands folded in her lap in a posture of quiet dignity that her mother would have recognized. "Clara Mendoza," Sofia said loudly, her voice carrying across nearby tables and causing heads to turn. "I'm so surprised to see you here. I didn't know that scholarship students could afford the ticket price. Or did the school make a special exception for you, like a charity case?" Clara looked up at Sofia and met her eyes directly. "I paid for my ticket just like everyone else, Sofia. $75 that I earned working weekends at the library." Sofia's smile grew wider, but there was nothing friendly in it. "How industrious of you. And your dress, it's so interesting, very creative. Did you make it yourself from curtains like that girl in that old movie? What was it called? Oh yes, Gone with the Wind. How appropriate." The girls behind Sofia laughed on cue, but Clara noticed that other students at nearby tables had stopped talking and were watching the confrontation with uncomfortable fascination. This was Sofia at her cruelest, performing humiliation as entertainment for an audience that was too afraid of becoming her next target to intervene. "I did make it myself," Clara said steadily. "My mother helped me. We worked on it together for weeks." "How sweet," Sofia cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Mother-daughter bonding time. I bet that was special for you both, since your mom probably doesn't have much time between serving mystery meat in the cafeteria and cleaning up after students who can actually afford to eat real food." She paused, shifting her weight, And Clara saw it coming, saw the cup tilting in Sofia's hand in a movement that was supposed to look accidental, but was clearly deliberate. "Oops!" Sofia cried out as the cup tipped forward, sending a cascade of dark purple grape juice directly onto Clara's lap, soaking the burgundy dress completely, the stains spreading across the fabric like a dark bruise. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so clumsy. But honestly, Clara, now the dress matches your level perfectly." Trash. The gymnasium went silent. Even the band seemed to pause between songs at exactly the wrong moment, creating a pocket of complete quiet in which Sofia's final word echoed with devastating clarity. Students at dozens of tables turned to stare at the scene, at Clara sitting frozen in her chair with purple juice dripping from her ruined dress, at Sofia standing over her with an expression of triumphant cruelty barely disguised as concern. Clara stood up slowly, the wet fabric of the dress clinging to her legs, juice dripping onto the floor beneath her. For one long moment she simply stood there, and Sofia's smile grew even wider, clearly savoring what she believed was her ultimate victory, the moment when she had finally succeeded in completely destroying the scholarship girl who had dared to challenge her supremacy. Then Clara smiled. It was a small smile, private almost, but it held something that made Sofia's expression flicker with uncertainty. Without saying a word, Clara turned and walked toward the bathroom, leaving a trail of purple drops across the pristine gymnasium floor, very aware that every eye in the room followed her exit. Sofia watched her go, still smiling, and turned back to her friends. "Well, I guess that problem solved itself," she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Hopefully, she'll just go home now and save us all from having to look at that pathetic homemade disaster anymore." But in the bathroom, Clara stood before the mirror and did exactly what she and her mother had planned for. Her hands found the hidden seams at her waist and shoulders, the decorative panels that concealed their true purpose. She took a deep breath, remembering Maria's final instructions, remembering weeks of work and planning and hope. Then she pulled. The hidden seams released exactly as Maria had designed them, and the ruined burgundy outer layer of the dress came away in Clara's hands like a chrysalis being shed by a butterfly. She stood in the bathroom, holding the stained fabric, and in the mirror's reflection she saw what had been hidden beneath all along, a gown of shimmering silver that caught the fluorescent bathroom lights and transformed them into something magical. The inner dress was even more beautiful than Clara remembered from their final fitting the night before. The silver fabric moved like liquid moonlight, fitted perfectly at the bodice, and flowing into a skirt that had just enough volume to suggest elegance without being impractical. Strategic panels of sheer material at the shoulders and sides added drama while remaining entirely appropriate, and the whole creation seemed to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the fabric itself and everything to do with the love and determination that had gone into its construction. Clara carefully folded the ruined outer layer and set it on the bathroom counter. Her hands were trembling slightly, not with nervousness now, but with something else, something that felt like power, like the moment before a storm breaks when the air is charged with electricity and possibility. She checked her hair, smoothed the silver fabric one final time, and walked back toward the gymnasium, with her head held high and her heart beating a rhythm that sounded like triumph. The band had resumed playing, and the noise of conversation had returned to its previous levels. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the room. Students were still talking about what had happened, still discussing Sofia's vicious attack on the scholarship girl, still expressing varying degrees of sympathy or cruel amusement, depending on their own positions in Westbridge's social hierarchy. Sofia had returned to her table and was holding court, describing the look on Clara's face when the juice had spilled, embellishing the story with each retelling until it became an epic tale of her own cleverness and Clara's humiliation. She was mid-sentence, her hands gesturing dramatically, when someone at her table gasped and pointed toward the entrance. Clara Mendoza walked back into the gymnasium, and the effect was like a stone dropped into still water, ripples of silence spreading outward from her entry point as student after student noticed her return and stopped talking to stare. But she wasn't wearing the ruined burgundy dress. She wasn't wearing anything they had seen before. She was transformed, elevated, glowing in silver that seemed to capture every light in the room and reflect it back twice as bright. The silence spread like wildfire until even the band faltered and stopped playing, leaving only the sound of Clara's footsteps as she walked across the gymnasium floor toward the center of the room. She moved with confidence that came from knowing that she had prepared for exactly this moment, that Sofia's cruelty had been anticipated and turned into an opportunity, that what was meant to destroy her had instead revealed something even more beautiful. Students began to whisper, then to talk more loudly, then to applaud. It started with one person, a junior boy named Marcus, who sat at a table full of other scholarship students, and then it spread to another table and another, until the gymnasium filled with the sound of clapping hands and impressed exclamations. People were standing up to get a better look, pulling out phones to take pictures, pointing at Clara's dress and marveling at the transformation. Sofia sat frozen at her table, her face cycling through expressions so quickly that they blurred together: confusion, disbelief, understanding, and finally a rage so pure and hot that it seemed to radiate from her like heat from a furnace. She had been so certain that spilling the juice would destroy Clara's evening, would send her home crying, would cement Sofia's position as the undisputed queen of Westbridge. Instead, somehow, impossibly, Clara had turned the attack into a moment of spectacular triumph. "How did she?" Madison started to ask, but Sofia cut her off with a sharp gesture. "It's a trick," Sofia hissed, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the fury contorting her features. "She must have changed dresses. She probably had a backup hidden somewhere. This is so typical, so desperate, so—" But Clara had reached the center of the dance floor now, and the principal, Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, was climbing onto the small stage at the front of the gymnasium, microphone in hand, clearly pleased by the dramatic energy filling the room. Dr. Blackwell was a shrewd woman in her late 50s who had spent 30 years in education and had developed a finely tuned sense for moments that mattered, moments that revealed character in ways that standardized tests and college essays never could. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Blackwell's voice boomed through the sound system, silencing the crowd, "I believe it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for, the announcement of this year's Winter Ball prom queen." Sofia stood up so quickly that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This was it. This was her moment. She had spent weeks campaigning, had made sure that all the right people knew to vote for her, had orchestrated a social media campaign that had made her coronation seem inevitable. She began walking toward the stage, her midnight blue gown swishing with each confident step, her smile returning as she prepared to claim what she considered her birthright. The principal opened a silver envelope with deliberate slowness, clearly enjoying the drama of the moment. "This year's voting was particularly interesting," Dr. Blackwell continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We had a record number of write-in candidates, which tells me that our students are thinking independently rather than simply following expected patterns. That's something I'm very proud to see." Sofia had reached the steps leading up to the stage and placed one elegantly manicured hand on the railing, ready to ascend the moment her name was called. Around the gymnasium, students leaned forward in their seats, some hoping to see Sofia crowned, others secretly wishing for an upset. All of them caught up in the tension of the moment. "The winner of this year's Winter Ball Prom Queen title," Dr. Blackwell said, pausing for dramatic effect, "receiving an unprecedented 73% of the vote, is Clara Mendoza." The gymnasium exploded with noise. Students jumped to their feet, cheering and applauding, their enthusiasm genuine and overwhelming. The scholarship students at the back tables were screaming with joy, hugging each other and pumping their fists in the air. Even students from wealthier families, Students who had never paid much attention to Clara before were clapping with real appreciation, moved by the dramatic reversal they had witnessed, inspired by the creativity and dignity that Clara had demonstrated in the face of Sofia's cruelty. Clara stood in the center of the dance floor, completely shocked, tears streaming down her face as she tried to process what was happening. People were calling her name, reaching out to touch her dress, telling her how beautiful she looked, how brave she was, how much they admired what she had done. Someone pressed a bouquet of silver roses into her hands. Someone else draped a silver sash across her shoulder, and through it all, Clara could only stand and weep and smile and wonder if she was dreaming. Sofia remained frozen at the bottom of the stage steps, one hand still on the railing, her face a mask of absolute horror. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. She was Sofia Hawthorne. She wore a dress from Paris. Her father donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to this school. Clara was nobody, nothing, a scholarship student whose mother worked in the cafeteria. The natural order of things had been completely inverted, and Sofia couldn't process it, couldn't accept it, couldn't breathe past the rage and humiliation that threatened to choke her. "No," Sofia said, her voice barely audible over the cheering crowd. Then louder, "No, this is wrong. There's been a mistake." But Dr. Blackwell was already gesturing for Clara to come to the stage, and Clara began walking forward, still crying, still smiling, still clutching the silver roses like they were the most precious things in the world. Students moved aside to create a path for her, and as she passed, many reached out to touch her arm or her dress, to offer congratulations, to be part of this moment that would be remembered and retold for years to come, as the night that the invisible girl became visible, the night that kindness and creativity triumphed over cruelty and wealth. Sofia watched Clara's approach with mounting panic. She couldn't let this happen. She had to do something, say something, stop this impossible nightmare from continuing. As Clara drew near, Sofia stepped directly into her path, blocking her way to the stage. "You cheated somehow," Sofia spat, her voice shaking with fury. "You had to have cheated. Nobody would vote for you. Nobody even likes you. You're just the girl who smells like grease, remember? You're nothing." Clara stopped and looked at Sofia with an expression that held no anger, only a kind of sad understanding. "I'm not nothing, Sofia," Clara said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "I never was. You just needed to believe that I was so you could feel better about yourself. But your cruelty doesn't make you powerful. It just makes you cruel." The students closest to them had gone silent, straining to hear the exchange. Sofia's face turned an alarming shade of red, and she raised her hand as if to slap Clara. But Dr. Blackwell's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Miss Hawthorne, step aside, now." Sofia turned to look at the principal, and something in Dr. Blackwell's expression made it clear that this was not a request, but a command that would have consequences if disobeyed. Sofia's hand slowly lowered, and for a moment she simply stood there, trapped between her fury and the realization that she had lost, that for once in her privileged life she had wanted something desperately and had not gotten it. Then Sofia made her final mistake. Instead of stepping aside gracefully, instead of accepting defeat with dignity, she turned to leave, but moved too quickly, too carelessly, in her expensive Paris gown and her elaborate high heels. Her foot came down directly in the puddle of purple grape juice that still marked the spot where she had spilled the drink on Clara earlier in the evening, the dark liquid that no one had yet cleaned up because the drama of the evening had pulled everyone's attention elsewhere. Sofia's heels slipped in the juice, her arms windmilled frantically for balance, and then she fell. It wasn't a graceful stumble or a minor trip. It was a complete, spectacular fall that sent her crashing to the gymnasium floor with a sound that echoed through the silent room. Her midnight blue gown, her precious dress from Paris that had cost more than most families spent on rent in 6 months, bore the full impact of her fall. The delicate beading ripped away from the fabric with a sound like breaking glass. The hem tore completely, and worst of all, the entire front of the dress became soaked in the purple grape juice that had been meant to humiliate Clara. but had instead created a slick trap for its originator. The gymnasium remained absolutely silent for 3 full seconds as Sofia lay sprawled on the floor in her ruined designer gown, purple stains spreading across the midnight blue fabric like an ugly bruise. Then someone laughed. It was a nervous, quickly stifled sound, but it broke the spell, and suddenly dozens of students were laughing, not cruelly but with the kind of amazed disbelief that comes from witnessing perfect cosmic justice, the kind of moment that seemed too perfectly ironic to be real, but was happening right before their eyes. Sofia scrambled to her feet, tears streaming down her face now, her perfect makeup running in dark streaks, her elaborate hairstyle coming undone. She looked around at the laughing students, at Clara standing nearby in her silver gown, looking concerned rather than triumphant, at Dr. Blackwell on the stage, shaking her head with disappointment, and something inside Sofia seemed to break completely. "I hate all of you," Sofia screamed, her voice cracking with tears and rage. "Every single one of you." Then she turned and ran from the gymnasium, her ruined dress trailing behind her, leaving purple footprints with each step, Madison and her other friends scrambling after her in a confused attempt at damage control. The laughter faded quickly, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Clara stood very still, looking at the purple footprints that led to the exit, and felt something unexpected: pity. Not for the Sofia who had tormented her for 3 years, but for the frightened, insecure girl who had hidden behind cruelty because she had no other tools for feeling powerful, who had just publicly destroyed herself in the same moment she had tried to destroy someone else. "Clara," Dr. Blackwell's voice called from the stage, gentle but insistent. "Come accept your crown, dear." Clara turned back toward the stage and walked forward, stepping carefully around the purple puddle that had played such an unexpected role in the evening's events. She climbed the steps, and Dr. Blackwell placed a simple silver tiara on her head, then leaned in to whisper in her ear. "You handled that with remarkable grace," the principal said quietly. "Both the attack and the aftermath. That's true royalty, regardless of what any crown says." The gymnasium erupted in applause again as Clara turned to face the crowd, wearing her silver dress and her simple crown, her face still streaked with tears but glowing with something that looked like joy mixed with disbelief. The band started playing again, launching into an upbeat song that invited dancing, and students flooded onto the floor, many of them approaching Clara to offer congratulations, to ask for photos, to tell her how inspired they were by what they had witnessed. Through the rest of the evening, Clara danced and laughed and accepted compliments with genuine humility that only made people admire her more. She thought about her mother, who would be finishing her shift at the school kitchen soon, and would hear about this night from the other cafeteria workers who had been watching from the kitchen doorway. She thought about her father, gone now for 5 years, but forever present in the values he had instilled, the belief that dignity came from character rather than circumstances. And she thought about Sofia, who had spent so much energy trying to make Clara feel small, never understanding that true power came not from making others feel less, but from building them up, not from expensive dresses, but from the courage to create beauty from scraps, not from inherited privilege, but from earned respect. As midnight approached and the winter ball began to wind down, Clara stood near the exit with her silver roses and her simple crown, greeting departing students who stopped to thank her for an unforgettable evening. Through the glass doors, she could see fresh snow beginning to fall, soft and white and clean, covering the parking lot in a blanket of new beginnings. Tomorrow, she would return to being a scholarship student, would still have to navigate the complicated social dynamics of Westbridge Academy, would still face challenges and obstacles that came from being different in a place that valued conformity. But tonight had changed something fundamental. She had proven to herself and to everyone watching that she belonged, that her presence was not something to apologize for, that creativity and determination could triumph over cruelty and wealth. The invisible girl had become visible, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. And in a small apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant, Maria Mendoza sat waiting for her daughter to come home, ready to hear every detail of the night that their hard work and love had made possible, ready to celebrate the victory that belonged to both of them, ready to embrace the girl who smelled like hope and possibility, and the unbreakable strength that came from refusing to be made small. The snow continued to fall over Greenwich, Connecticut, covering everything in white, but inside Westbridge Academy, a different kind of transformation had taken place, one that couldn't be erased by mourning or forgotten with time, one that would be remembered as the night that dignity wore a crown and justice wore a dress of silver moonlight, lovingly stitched by hands that had never stopped believing that beautiful things could be created from nothing more than determination, creativity, and love. And so we reach the end of another unforgettable journey. If this story touched your heart, stirred your emotions, or simply made you feel something, you can help me in 3 simple ways. Leave your like. It's quick, free, and shows me I'm on the right path. Subscribe and turn on the bell to never miss our upcoming stories. Comment below what moment struck you the most in this story. Every like, every subscription, every comment motivates me to bring you more engaging, emotional stories full of twists and turns. And if you know someone who would love this story, share it. Sometimes a good narrative is exactly what someone needs for their day. Thank you for being here with me. See you in the next story.